Hello, welcome to another episode of The High Ground, powered by Premier Companies. Glenn, it is just you and I in the podcast room today.
Outstanding.
It is just myself, or my counterpart, Jeff, is on the road and in crop nutrient meetings this week, so he cannot join us, but I think we've done this before.
We have.
And we've got a lot to talk about.
There is lots to talk about right now.
So timestamp this a little bit. We're kind of mid-September here in 2025, and fall is just starting. But Glenn, before we get started, we got the question of the day. So tell our listeners, tell me about when and where was your most recent vacation, and what was memorable about it?
There you go. That was a T-ball right there.
That was a T-ball. So I kind of know Glenn's schedule, so I know where he's been, but I was going to have him share it.
Yeah, outstanding. No, thank you for asking, Sal. So I just took my lovely bride of 40 years, and every 5 years or so, we try to do a bigger trip and go out west and run around the mountains. And, you know, some of them in the past have been probably as much around. I always say that it's a 30th anniversary a romantic 30th anniversary backpack mule deer scouting trip, right?
Backpack mule deer scouting trip.
But this one had no mule deer scouting involved. Now, there was a little let's call it a agro-tourism session. But no, we went to the Pacific Northwest, ran around in Washington and Oregon, which we had never spent any time there other than just flying into SeaTac. And had a great time. We saw went to the Cascades, North Cascades National Park, which is not rated very highly, even though it's really close to Seattle.
Huh.
And it's because of access, right? It's got a state highway. I think it's Highway 20, goes right through the middle of it, but it's through the bottom of the valley, and you really can't see much, right? Because it's so heavily wooded. And but anyway, we took a trail right out of the gate, climbed about 3,000 feet, and it's just breathtaking. When you get to the top and you get up where you can see across the peaks and the glaciers, it's really breathtaking.
Wow.
And then to recover, we ran over to the Palouse region, which the Palouse is like southeastern Washington, a little bit of Idaho, a little bit of northeastern Oregon. And it's that part of the world. What it is, it's kind of like the foothills of the mountains, and it's deep, lush soils that are very, very productive. And they raise, spring wheat. They raise chickpeas, garbanzo beans, chickpeas. They're the same thing. They raise a lot of different crops over there, and they farm on the contour across these crazy hillsides. And it's hard to capture in photographs, right?
Yeah.
I took a lot of photographs, and you just can't capture how steep it is. But what's unusual is they have side hill kits on all the combines, right? So they go across the hillside, on a 15, 20% slope, whatever it is. And the box, right, the separator and the engine and the cab actually turn to where they are more vertical, even though the header stays with the chassis. It's really a neat.
So is that on the frame? They've got airbags or something, I guess?
Yeah, they've got
hydraulic cylinders.
Right. It looks like they replaced the axle, and then they put there's two hydraulic cylinders. I took pictures of it, sent it back home to my peeps. Yeah. And anyway, we went from there to Hell's Canyon, went and did some climbing on Mount Hood in Oregon. It's really pretty. And then it was a little smoky there. Then went up and went past Mount St. Helens. Went to the Paradise side of Mount Rainier. It's absolutely breathtaking, and we liked it so well that we went over to the coast and went up around Olympic, did some hiking there. And the last day before we flew home, we actually drove back to the east side of Mount Rainier.
Wow!
Kind of the northeast side is the Sunrise side, and hiked up there. Which the road goes pretty high there, so you can get a really good view without doing a lot.
Road goes up to 4,000 or 5,000.
No, a little higher than that.
Oh, wow!
Yeah, it's the highest road in Washington State.
Nice.
So, yeah,
so you did a lot of driving. You put on a couple thousand miles.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow,
about 2,000 miles, and put several miles on our feet too. And we camped about half the time. So.
Now, camp like rough camping?
No. We didn't backpack in much this time. We carried a day pack, but no. Normally we do backpack in, but it was actually too hot to believe.
Oh,
I mean, even at altitude, normally when you're around the mountains this time of year, right? We're so sensitive to temperature because we're, it's crazy hot at home, and you go out in the mountains and
it's 70 degrees, 65.
Oh no, 50, 45, 50 degrees feels like it's the midwinter, right? And you stop climbing and you're sweaty and you're froze to death. Shoot, we hardly ever put our coats on.
Wow.
Yeah. But it was really pretty. It's neat country.
Good deal. Well, I don't have anything that exciting. I think, of course, I've got a 14-year-old of our listeners, and all my coworkers know. And she likes to go to the beach, and then we also like going to Gatlinburg. And just what I've found is we've really enjoyed Gatlinburg, and the reason being is that you got a cabin, and it forces us to kind of stop and not do any other projects. There's no brush piles to burn or anything like that.
Sure.
And so we end up playing games and just spending a lot of time together. And I think that's probably one of my favorite family vacations, is where we can just spend time and not in any activities. I cannot stand parks, hate lines, don't like traffic. But once you get to those cabins, it's pretty nice just to be quiet. And
sounds relaxing.
Very relaxing. Yeah. Well, Glenn, we are here in the fall, and harvest has started.
Yep.
And I think beans are getting cut everywhere. And tell us a little bit about the harvest, just the harvest time and growers, and what we should be aware of and watching out for. And
sure.
And I guess just take the ball and run with it. What's on your mind as a farmer and agronomist?
Well, I appreciate you saying everybody's cutting beans, because I don't have one bean yet I can cut.
Because you're sitting in the podcast room.
No. It has nothing to do with that.
I
just don't have any ready. So I've got some April 16th soybeans that I've treated so fancy that they won't finish now, which is good. That means they'll probably be pretty decent. But Mark and I went by there yesterday. Mark came down. Mark Steiner works for Premier Ag, is my account rep, and he came down. We did a crop tour. Went to some really, really fancy corn. That it may not be 300 bushel, but it's really fancy.
Nice.
And it's not black layered yet, which and it is starting to give up, right up to about the ear leaf, which really, we probably should come back to that. But we ran over to look at my early beans, and on the sand, they've given up. It looks almost like you sprayed them with Gramoxone. And yet on the black ground, they're still green, and they're starting to turn more normally there. But
these were mid-April.
Yeah, April 16th.
So let's stop you there for a little bit. And this is, and you have done multiple applications of fungicides.
I have.
You practice what you preach.
Try to.
And
on some acres, anyway.
On some acres, yep. Yeah. And so now growers always complain, or tend to complain, about the stay green, or
green stems.
Green stems, right? Yep. And so here you are, and people are cutting beans, and tell us the benefits of what you expect out of that not delayed senescence, but
that's actually the right term.
Okay,
so it's delayed senescence. And so one of the observations we made in this journey for higher yields on soybeans is that to get high yields on soybeans, you have to plant really early, right? It seems like if you ever want to have spots in a field that are in excess of 100 bushel, it's hard to do that with June planted beans or even May planted beans. It seems like you always see those. The beans planted early may not look the most spectacular, but they almost are always the highest yielding. It's also, in this journey, we've discovered that, hey, when you plant early, whether you use fungicide or not, this whole green stem phenomenon becomes a lot more common. Right?
Okay.
And so when you plant early, for whatever reason, you get more green stemmed issues. If you use fungicide on them, which most of the time when we plant really early, we manage them more intensely, and you use nutritionals on them, it tends to make them have green stems even more.
Okay.
So, but I would tell you this, if you've ever been in 90 plus, 100 plus bushel soybeans, they may cut pretty hard. but there's nothing that feels like that, right? Because the gross dollars per acre that are coming in your machine, it's a really good feeling, right? It almost kind of gives you the willies just a little bit, just thinking about it, because it's really neat. And I think there's going to be spots that'll be, I think I'll have spots in this field there's about 150 acres over Knox that'll have some, you'll probably have some 100 plus bushel soybeans in there.
Very good.
So I've had the last two crops, right? So 4 years ago and 2 years ago, it was 104.6. 2 years ago, it was 98 and some change, almost 90, like within a tenth of a bushel of 99 bushel. And so
nice.
So there'll be some good, and the sand actually looks better than usual, other than they've died just a little bit prematurely. So
had a lot of water, had a lot of rain.
They've had lots and lots of rain until just recently, and I'm hoping that all it affected was just the top, the top pods, top nodes. Because what happens is when they die prematurely like that is typically the beans, they stop progressing. I think it's probably a little late for abortion, right? It's really not abortion, it's abscission, right? Yeah. It's a little late to be dropping pods, but what will happen is you'll end up with these little tiny green BBs. And I know the guys on sand are finding that, right? Some on the better sands, where they're cutting early beans, I got a neighbor that said he cut some that were 75 bushel, but there's some 25 bushel beans out there too, right? Where they've died prematurely, and it's not that the beans weren't there. The beans are the size of BBs, right? And they're shriveled up, and it's just, where something predisposes the plant. In this case, it's probably drought.
Okay.
Excuse me, drought.
Well, back to the story. So you haven't cut a bean yet.
Yeah, I haven't cut a bean yet, but as soon as those are ready, I'm probably going to have nearly the entire crop ready. Yeah. And so really what I had Mark over about was, I don't have a grandfather or a dad anymore. And so it's really nice when you have an account rep with Premier that can come out and be an extra set of eyes. And we walked a few cornfields, and what we discovered is the corn probably, of course, we've managed corn pretty intensely too, right? Multiple fungicide applications. Health was pretty good, other than they're starting to give up from the bottom to the middle. And that's just from heat. Nitrogen is probably starting to wane, but yeah, it looks like we got some pretty decent corn.
We really didn't have, I don't think to a great degree, a lot of the diseases that it kind of felt like we could have. I mean, it was very wet. It seemed like it was pretty conducive to high disease, but never really experienced it.
Well, it depends on where you're at. There's some spots, where, even on this side of the state, there's pockets where they had southern rust pretty bad this year. We did not have the tar spot that we had the previous year, but we had more southern rust this year. And on that side of the state, I was in a combine last night with a young man, and he said that they had only made a Xyway application, and you could see the southern rust. It was just boiling off the leaves, but it was still, it was decent corn. It died probably a little prematurely. They were shelling it at probably 24% moisture, so they were drying it down. That's kind of the peril. If I was going to, to get away from what I'm doing and think more broadly about our clientele, when you got $4 corn or sub $4 corn, by the time you get done putting a basis on it, if you have the ability to dry corn, you probably should be out there harvesting it, right? And it looks like there's no hurry, right? We got 90-degree temperatures here in the middle of September and relatively low humidity, and corn's drying like crazy. But none of us have enough time on our pallets to just, to not take advantage of the opportunity. So if I had a dryer, I would certainly be out there shelling corn like a madman. I say a madman. I would certainly be trying to make a dent in it. And the reason why I say that is because eventually, you and I talked about this just the other day, every fall, it looks like you have all the time in the world until some tropical storm, tropical depression off the west coast of Africa moves across the Caribbean and starts spinning up from warm water, gets into the Gulf of Mexico and comes up the Delta, right? And when you get those hurricanes in, the latter part of September, first part of October, or all the way through October, You can go from feeling pretty comfortable about harvesting a crop to genuine concern. And then that has a crazy long tail, right? Everybody's like, oh, well, we can shell corn when there's moisture. Sure, you can. You can also make ruts in the field. You can also pack the crap out of it. You can set the stage to actually delay planting next year. And it becomes this vicious cycle of compaction. I just hate it, right? So if you can go out there and harvest corn right now and you have the ability to dry it, if you can get a decelerated, I know the discount schedule has come down because of the price of corn, right? It's about 4 cents a half point locally. And so that makes it 8 cents a point. And that's more palatable than 7 cents a half point, right?
Yeah. But so what about, growers, and this is a dated mindset, but they, the temptation is there to let it dry down in the field.
Yeah.
So you mentioned the time constraints that we all run into, and pretty soon our time, and that meets the weather, and the next thing you know, it's Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
But
well, there's a big crop, right? And so part of it is it's highly unlikely that most growers are going to have enough storage to hold all of it. And the integrators, right? The buyers are going to fill up. And, some of them have the ability to expand their storage and go out on the ground, that sort of thing. But yeah, it'll get plugged up. Yeah, we get plugged up. Yeah. And then the more plugged up you get, if everybody waits until it's dry, then next thing you know, you got big long lines. There goes your efficiencies, right? And, fall is really where you find out what kind of operational excellence you have, right? The spring oftentimes is so stressful because it's just about, can I find the dry ground as it's drying up and be in 2 or 3 places at one time. Yeah. But in the fall, you really find out who has operational excellence, right? And I would wish that on all of our growers.
Yeah, and you about have to have a running start. By the time by the time you get your semis, you get the trucks placed, to the trailers placed, to the wagons, or your drivers lined up, or your grain cart. It takes quite a bit just to get going.
Absolutely. Yeah, I talked to my nephew last night, and he basically told me that they had a problem with the combine. They couldn't identify it, and all it was just the tab for the in the separator on a combine, Sal, there are 2 big screens, right? There's the shoe sieve on the bottom, and on the top is the chauffer. And the chauffer in the front has a really aggressive part that, is pretty open and allows a lot of material to go through it. Well, the little tab on the bottom of that screen that allows you to open and close it from inside the cab had broken, right? That sheet metal tab had broken off there, and it wasn't staying open as far as it could, and they kept overrunning it. Well, it took them almost 200 acres, right? They're 200 acres in before they actually got it dialed in, and he said they almost doubled their capacity by getting that fixed.
Wow.
But
and a lot of those are automatic now, right?
This is automatic. Okay. And if they put it on automatic settings, they just, they couldn't go very fast at all, and all of a sudden it'd start running corn over. And so they kept slowing down, and finally they got it diagnosed because the rest of the chauffer was adjusting and wasn't throwing any kind of an error code. It was just this front portion that is more aggressive. That was closed up. So
modern combines are just amazing. All combines are just miracles of science, but the modern ones that are can take so much material,
right, and pull grain out of it to where you can't hardly find any
in such a short length of time. Just
Absolutely.
a short, yeah.
Yeah, it is. They're really a neat machine. But to your point, it takes, I'd be half done with my crop probably before I would have figured that out. I'd probably been half done with my crop if it took them a couple hundred acres. So
wow.
Yeah. But anyway, there's other things going on, right? Again, this corn crop, even though it's standing really well right now, it's, we didn't plant real early this year, Sal. And what happens when we plant later to the stature of corn? Does it get taller or shorter?
But it could get taller.
It gets a lot taller, right? So some of the corn we walked through yesterday that hadn't quite black layered, it was like probably 75%, maybe 80% milk line. So it probably is within a week of physiological maturity. That corn was all over my head. I mean, all of the ears were over my head.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So, and some of these, I don't think I was being particularly short stature either. So it was 6835 DeKalb, which is a really high yielding. I think of it being, for being full season corn, it's pretty modest statured. Had 5911 in the air, looks equally as good. And then we got over into, which is a cropland variety. And then we had cropland 5682, which is a new variety. And it was even higher ear placement yet, but had, I just think it's going to be a spectacular yielding field. It just needs to progress a little bit.
And the risk being with those higher ears, and the reason for that is it's still got the same amount of nodes, right?
That's right.
There's just that much.
That's right. Well, you got more leverage, right?
Yeah.
So if the stalk would get weak or the roots get weak, right? A lot of times the roots, a lot of people say, this corn has weak roots. Well, most of the time that's not really the case. It's not the roots that give up. It's the lower stalk, right? It's the crown. It's that area where you transition from the stalk into the roots, right? It's that little cone shaped component, and it's where there's about 6 or 7 nodes or rings of nodal roots down there at the bottom of the plant. And if that gets infected with something like fusarium, it doesn't predispose the plant immediately. Typically, it takes some period of time. But what you'll notice later in the season is you'll see these stalks that are ghosted, or I call them grayed out. I think the technical term now is they have top dieback. But when you see that, oftentimes you go push on that stalk and it's not going to stand very well. So I do encourage growers to take advantage. There's probably not a huge, there's no huge risk immediately. And we do have 90-degree weather and corn is drying. And I'd probably take advantage of that too. In fact, I do, because I don't have a lot of storage. But I would tell you that, if you notice that you get a lot of grayed out plants, or you see fields that are completely toast, right? They probably should go out and do a push test, and not just say, well, we're going to wait till it's 17% moisture or less before we go get it. They probably need to do a push test and ensure that crop's going to be there.
Yeah, you mentioned the events in the Gulf. I mean, it just takes those hurricanes, even though you can see them for weeks, sure, sometimes. But when they do come, I mean, they bring a lot of rain, and sometimes they bring wind with it.
That's exactly right.
And hopefully never, what was it, Ivan that come up with, I mean, that's extreme. But even the normal.
Oh, yeah, just
40 miles an hour. And
yeah. Yeah, especially when you've got really tall corn that's late planted, that some of it didn't get cared for, right? In other words, there's some of this that didn't get fungicide.
Yep.
It's died prematurely. We start out with wet spring. When you start out with wet spring, you have more fusarium crown rot. You have more fusarium crown rot. You don't have as good a standing corn either. When you plant later, you have taller plants. Taller plants have more leverage. We've had lots of rain, so there's pretty big ears up there. Lots of mass, lots
sure,
of weight, which tends to make them want to lodge. I mean, we're set up to have a calamity, even though right now it looks like it's never going to rain again, right? That's the way we, growers have pretty short memories, and we just, we tend to think that it's going to stay, whatever we have now, it's going to stay that way. And I just suspect that growers need to take a look. Besides standability, the other thing they probably, there's 2 other things I was thinking about. One was a telephone call this morning around phosphorus, but let's finish the crop. One other thing that growers probably need to get out and look at is ear rots, right? So yesterday we were shucking ears back, just amazed at how much of the yield was hidden, right? It looks like the ears are like 6-8 inches long. You shuck them back and the darn things are 9 or 10 inches long because it goes clear down, real short shanked.
Wow.
And just beautiful. But, Mark commented right away. He goes, "Hey, what is this up here on the end?" And I was like, "Well, it's just a little bit of ear rot." He said, "Is that something to worry about?" And I was like, "Well, not at these levels, right? But when you see pink in ear rot, if it's white, that's probably dipodia. But when you see pink, especially up there on the nose like that. And some of these products that are dirty nosed will have more ear rots. You know what I mean by dirty nose, where the ear comes out of the end of the shuck. They tend to be a little more prone. But what that is that's gibberella. And gibberella is an ear rot that's in the Fusarium family, but it produces not fumonisin, but it produces deoxynivalenol. And that's a mycotoxin that's really bad for monogastric animals. So if you're feeding hogs, and I think Premier is an integrator of corn and feeds a lot of hogs, that's a bad day, is to have that. Low levels, it's probably not a problem. But if you've got a field that has lots of pink going, well down the side of the ear, that's something that needs to be harvested sooner, not later, right?
Because it won't get better.
It will not get better. Most mycotoxins are most of these toxigenic organisms can go ahead and continue to grow even in storage, right? Unless they've been dried down with high temperatures and that sort of thing. So not all ear rots, by the way, are toxigenic, right? There are some that are and some are not, right? If you've been really dry and you see like a greenish yellow pathogen on there, that could be aspergillus, and it produces aflatoxin, which is really bad, right? It's one of the worst. Gibberella produces vomitoxin or deoxynivalenol. You have Fusarium produces fumonisin. These are all toxigenic organisms. Diplodia, on the other hand, which is a really common ear rot, does not produce mycotoxins. In other words, the pathogen degrades the crop. It does make the grain less valuable, but it doesn't produce these organic compounds that are among the most deadly toxins that known to man, right? I mean, these are not things to trifle with. Even at parts per million, they can have an impact on the food supply downstream.
But running them through a dryer, it stops the progression.
Yeah, if they're dried at high temperature, then you can affect the fungi. It will not clear up the mycotoxins that are already produced. Are still there, but you can arrest the pathogen itself so that it's not producing more mycotoxin, and it doesn't become a storage disease.
Wow. Okay. That's good.
So, the other thing that I took a question on the way over was around, I had a client call this morning and asked about, hey, what are we going to do about this phosphorus, right? Because he had been to he'd been to his local supplier and recognized that, it's twice as much as it was just a few years ago. And I was like, well, I said, what do you mean? He said, well, are we going to ban it, or are we going to do this, that, and the other? And I was like, it doesn't matter. I mean, if we have low numbers, then we could potentially ban it and maybe get a little more for our money. But for the most part, if you have, let's say 200 bushel corn, you're going to remove X amount of phosphorus, whether it took it out of a band or whether it took it out of the entire profile, right? At this point, we're not building, when we have, I don't know what the price of, we don't have Jeff here today, but I'm assuming it's in the $800 a ton range, right?
It's pretty stiff.
Yeah. And so at $800 a ton, let's say you're producing 200 bushel corn, if you think it's 0.35 pounds, that'd be 70 pounds of P2O5 you're removing. Well, in reality, if you're raising 200 bushel corn, you probably have places in the field that are 220, 230, maybe 240.
Yeah.
But guess what? Those spots are actually removing somewhere around 90 pounds of P2O5. And if you divide that by 0.46, that's 200 pounds, right? It's 200 pounds of DAP to basically replace the phosphorus that a 200 plus bushel corn crop is going to remove, right? I don't know, we have to put every ounce of it back, but we certainly don't want to do nothing, right? That's the peril, is when you get in these tough economic times and you have high, input costs. But yeah, it's a concern whenever, you do the math on that, that's basically 100, 200 bushel corn is going to remove, in excess of 200 bushel corn is going to remove somewhere around 200 pounds of DAP. That's 1/10 of a ton. That means it's $80 an acre.
Yeah.
So it's not rivaling nitrogen, it's not exceeding nitrogen, but it's certainly rivaling the cost of nitrogen per acre. And by the way, you cannot raise corn, you cannot raise good soybeans without phosphorus, right?
Yeah.
I think potassium is still, I wouldn't say it's a bargain, but it's more, it's priced more with more parity to the corn price than what phosphorus is right now.
So the temptation is, generally speaking, when we get in high phosphate prices, we start to see the products that have some claims about phosphorus efficiency.
Absolutely.
Those things tend to come out of the woodwork. Interesting. When we do see those, I think Avail or some other parts.
Sure.
But a lot of their data is from the central to western corn belt.
Yeah, that is true too, right? But I mean, and that is a peril, right? There's lots of folks out there that want to claim that they can either make it more efficient or that they can unlock phosphorus that is unavailable. Well, the dirty, the dirty truth is most phosphorus that's in the soil is unavailable. It's a very small amount, but the uptake of even a huge corn crop per day is relatively small, right? Even during grand growth, you probably never exceed 3.5 pounds of phosphorus per day. Where potassium, you're potentially removing 15 pounds, and nitrogen, it's in excess of 10, maybe even 11 pounds per day. Phosphorus is a real slow accumulator, and so you don't have to have a huge amount available at any one time. You just need to have a pretty good sized pool to start with, and it will find its way. It'll make its conversion, right? It's in equilibrium with the soil. So, the takeaway is this, right? We can't raise it without it. Banding might make it more efficient, but if the goal has been hopefully that we have maintained our soils to where we don't need to band, right? There's enough phosphorus there. We just don't want to mine it, right?
Yeah.
And so
doing nothing is not a good option.
That is not a good option at all, right? We always want to be in the habit of at least putting back what we removed with the crop. And probably, this is where, technology like Trax comes in, right? Our Trax department can come out and do grid sampling and let you know if there's not uniform phosphorus across the field. But that doesn't mean that you only use that to make decisions on how to fertilize, right? Once you've kind of straightened it up and got it more uniform, then ultimately we probably should be making phosphorus recommendations based on what we removed. And so the Trax department can take your data, right? You can bring them your yield data or email them your yield data, and they can then make as applied maps, or not as applied maps, but make variable rate maps that basically correspond or correlate to where you removed most of the crop. Because if you go out there with flat rate fertilizer, what you end up doing is you end up getting more on the spots that are already high because that's not where the crops are moving it. And those places where you have a really good crop, you're removing more P and they're going down, right?
And make the problem worse.
You make the problem worse. So that's how you get the mostest for the leastest is one, try to get as uniform as you can, but hopefully you've already done that, right? You've used Trax, you've used grid sampling to make your acres more uniform on P and K, and then utilize 21st century technology, right? We all have, yield data in the combine cab. Hopefully you're collecting that, right? That's the value. It's not just making a color picture. It's about collecting that data and getting it to folks that can use that to make intelligent decisions, right? And so what you might find is you can replace with variable rate technology, you can replace it at a much higher rate in those really good spots, and you can reduce it on those spots that are not producing. Maybe it was this spring, it would have been from a wet hole, right? We were really wet this spring. There's actually a lot of voids out there. It's surprising to me though, just walking a little bit of corn here recently, how well the corn did. Now, if there was standing water, there's no crop. But when you got to the edge of where the water stood, Sal, there's oftentimes a full crop within just a few feet of where you had standing water, right?
Huh.
It's amazing. It really speaks to the fellows that breed corn The hybrids we use today are just phenomenal, right? They come out of the ground, the best products 30 years ago wouldn't hold a candle to the way corn comes out of the ground today. How well they handle wet feet and anaerobic conditions. And maybe some of this is genetic, maybe some of it is seed treatment, right? I think it's actually a composite of all these things. But yeah, there's a reason why seed is expensive as it is, because it is without question been it has been the largest driver for yields of anything we've done.
Yeah. One other thing on the phosphorus, and I think that this is pretty fairly recent phenomenon. There are feedlots that are long gone. And not only that, but now this next generation owns the ground or farms the ground. And so where those feedlots were, the fences are gone, the fence rows are gone, the feedlots are gone, the harvest store is gone. And I guess just be aware that whenever you do the grid sampling, sometimes we can find those, obviously. And in some of those cases, we can bring the levels down a bit. We got some pretty hot spots out there.
Oh, and, absolutely.
Might be some efficiency gain there.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. The beauty of 20th century, spatial technology or 21st century technology is that we can get the mostest for the leastest, right? And that's really what agriculture is good at. We do a lot with very little, and we don't do it because we're environmental activists. We do it because we actively are trying to raise the most we can with the least we can.
Yep. Well, that sounds like a pretty good spot. Is there anything else, Glenn?
No, I think that does it, Sal.
All right.
It's been my pleasure to be here with you this morning.
Good conversation. Next time we're together, we'll make sure to have Jeff here.
It'd be great.
All right. Well, that's another episode of The High Ground, powered by Premier Companies. Thank you all very much.